Plus, and joining us right now, a friend of the show, a guy that is always giving with his time from ESPN, Jeff Carlisle. Jeff, welcome again, my friend.
Thanks, Anthony. How are you?
Oh, I couldn't be better, especially being born and raised here in Toronto. Last night was an unbelievable night with the Toronto Blue Jays moving on and also TFC making history. Let's talk about TFC, Jeff. They have been the butt of jokes all over MLS since the inception when they entered. Finally, they get into the playoffs. Finally, a world-class player like Giovinco, a guy like you that has covered the game, a guy like you that is born and raised in the U.S. What goes through your mind watching finally a franchise like Toronto get into the playoffs and a player like Giovinco?
Yeah, I mean, you just feel good for the fans. I mean, they've really suffered through some dark days. I mean, I can remember some late season collapses and then some seasons that never even really got started for them. And you saw the investment they were making in guys like Michael Bradley, but then, Josie Altidore comes, Giovinco comes, and I don't think it's much argument that Giovinco's having the best season ever in the history of the league. He's just been unbelievable from the word go. Not only the goals that he scored, but the ones that he set up, and then the goal last night was, it was just absolutely absurd. To fly back in time for that game from overseas and to be able to deliver a performance like that. I mean, I can remember Alexi Lalas doing that one time, coming back and, on a plane and playing like the next day. I think Landon Donovan did something similar after the 2002 World Cup. But, I mean, to do what Giovinco did and then to score a goal like he did, I mean, what a capstone, what a celebration it was for the Toronto fans last night.
Jeff, this has got to be a real important time right now for MLS and all the clubs in MLS, not just for TFC getting into the playoffs finally, but a player like Giovinco opening up the eyes, the ears of all European clubs, South American clubs with young talent that maybe is not given the opportunity like Giovinco was at Juventus to now possibly make that voyage over here to MLS. No longer does this league take guys that are, coming here for a vacation, as they say. They're looking at guys like Giovinco now. How important is this now with how successful Giovinco has worked for the league and TFC dishing out the money as they did?
Well, I think about it in a couple ways. I mean, you mentioned, guys coming over here for a vacation. I think another fear of players who are thinking about coming to MLS was that it would kill their international career. And we're seeing with Giovinco, we've seen it with some other guys too, but I think with Giovinco, he's shown that, he can thrive in this league, and it was, obviously it's got a well-earned reputation as a very physical league, MLS. And he can thrive over here. He can handle the physicality, and it's done his international prospects no harm. So, I think that's another big consideration to have. I mean, you think back to David Beckham, and he was still continuing to play for England. Robbie Keane has done it for Ireland as well. But I think in Giovinco's case, I mean, this was a guy who really was in his prime. You've heard that term kind of bandied about, by MLS folks a little bit too easily, I think, in the past. A lot of times they were referring to guys who were 30 or 31 as being in their prime. And, I think in Giovinco's case, he really is in the absolute peak of his career. So, it sends a great message for the league. But I think, other international players are going to be looking at MLS as a little bit more of a real proposition. And then you got Gio Dos Santos on the opposite coast, and obviously he's still playing for Mexico. So certainly it definitely sends a great message, for MLS, and I'm sure at league headquarters they're dancing in the streets because it's a move that has absolutely worked in every single possible way that you can think of.
Jeff, how long before we see the quality international coach now starting to think about coming to MLS and implement their style of play, whether it's a Spaniard, a German, an Italian, a Portuguese, on, a South American? When do we start seeing that? Because we've seen it with the players like you just mentioned, but we haven't really necessarily seen it with the coaches.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think, coaches have international aspirations too. And, I think that, the coaching side of it is lagging a little bit in terms of, a big name European coach or South American coach coming to MLS. I mean, there have been some big ones in the past. I mean, obviously, Bora Milutinovic was a big name, and certainly has coached a lot of teams at the World Cup. Pereira was another one who was here for a short spell. But I think it's just lagging a little bit. I think and that it might be a money issue as well. I mean, obviously, clubs have opened the purse strings in terms of getting players over here, but I wonder to what extent they'd be willing to do it for a coach. Certainly, some new coaches have come in, some young coaches. I mean, I think about DC United taking a chance on Ben Olsen, and New England to a certain extent with Jay Heaps. So I think it requires a club willing just to invest on that side of things. I mean, obviously Bruce Arena has certainly well compensated in LA and has done a fantastic job there. But again, my sense is that side of it is just lagging a little bit.
Just before we talk about the U.S. men's national team and the loss to Mexico and Costa Rica, I want to get your thoughts. I've been thinking about this today, and real happy for the day one season ticket holders and all the City of Toronto and TFC fans. But I was also thinking about the struggles of the Philadelphia Union in that franchise, and recently the Chicago Fire. These are two massive major markets, and these two markets, by not making the playoffs again, I think this is going to be a real challenge for them in the offseason to attract more people to come and watch, and even players or even better coaches. Your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, I think they're two slightly different situations. I think Chicago has not been afraid to spend. I mean, I think in that situation, it's just been a case of not spending their money wisely. They did bring in some quality players. I mean, I like David Accam. I think Harry Shipp is a fantastic prospect. And I think Gilberto, who Toronto fans know fairly well, I think he's the guy that's going to come good for Chicago. And even though they're out of it, he did score some big goals for them, or potentially big goals. So it's really on the defensive end. I think some poor decisions have come home to roost. I mean, you just look at the back line. I think Jovan Jones was a good pickup, but everywhere else, Jeff Lorenowitz is really a midfielder being asked to play center back. I think that's a tough situation for him. I mean, it's not an easy transition. I mean, look at Jermaine Jones and how he has struggled at times, making that switch himself. So, I just think it's a case of bad decisions. I mean, I think in the case of Philadelphia, there just hasn't been as much investment, I think, and also the wrong kind of investment. I mean, just the carousel, the goalkeeper carousel that they had going there, I think was just kind of mind-boggling and really puzzling. So, both clubs have, shed some executives. Obviously Frank Yallop is out of Chicago. Nick Sakavitz was the operating partner in Philly. He's gone as well. And so I think it's just going to be a situation where they just got to make better organizational decisions and really be careful in who they hire and make some good hires. Again, MLS is such a value league. I mean, you can talk about DPs, and yes, it's important for those guys to perform, but it's almost those lower tier guys that almost make or break you. And certainly I think in both teams, they haven't made enough good decisions in those kinds of players to be able to be competitive. So, that said, I like Jim Curtin. I think he's done everything he could to make the best of a not so great situation. So, whoever comes in above him, it's going to be interesting to see if he stays on. But, I think he's a bright up-and-coming coach. So, we'll see how he fares. But, yeah, definitely tough times in both those cities. And, again, it's bad decisions coming home to roost.
Jeff, just before we let you go, let's spend a couple of minutes on USA and the men's national team there, losing to Mexico in dramatic fashion, losing to Costa Rica, which really didn't mean very much. But now, to me, I believe the honeymoon's over for Jurgen Klinsmann, and I believe now the spotlight is solely on Sunil Gulati, president of USA Soccer, in making a decision to continue on with Jurgen or to make a change sooner than later. Your thoughts?
Certainly it's his decision. It's always been his decision, and I think that may have been a little bit of the problem. I think, Sunil Gulati made such a prolonged pursuit of Jurgen Klinsmann, 5 years. Klinsmann kind of left him at the altar twice before finally saying, "I do." And I think that's that's almost it's created an awkward situation for Sunil Gulati because he's so not only emotionally invested, monetarily invested. I mean, there's just such a huge focus on Jurgen Klinsmann, and he tried to get him for so long, and then finally got him that I think he's just really reluctant to cut the cord. And I think in the past that oftentimes that's been a good thing. I mean, you look at Mexico and how often they change managers. I mean, that has not worked out very well for them. They qualified for the World Cup really thanks to the U.S., not really because of anything that they did. So, I'm not always a huge fan of changing the manager, but I think, I also think it's a little bit too close to World Cup qualifying to make a change right now. I mean, think about it. I mean, 3 weeks from now, Jurgen Klinsmann's going to be calling, or whoever the coach would be, is going to be calling the players into camp. I just think that's an incredibly awkward time to be contemplating making a change. I mean, once those games are over, I think that's pretty much it for the national team program for the year. And, then, I think Sunil Gulati can take a prolonged look at what's going on. And, I expect the U.S. to get some decent results out of these 2 games. Trinidad is going to be tricky, though. I mean, they've given Mexico everything that they could handle the last 2 times they played them and played good attacking soccer along the way. So certainly that's going to be a big challenge. But, I mean, I understand the impulse to make a change, but I think the timing is not quite right at the moment.
Well, let me ask you this as we close it out. What happens if some of the veterans on this squad, like a Bradley, a Dempsey, and some others, maybe a Jones, go up to Sunil Gulati and express their concern that the locker room isn't a pleasant place right now playing under Jurgen Klinsmann? We saw the Fabian Johnson situation there, and we're starting to hear more and more stories. We know the Landon Donovan story of the past, and we know the certain style that Jurgen wants his players to play. Tip-top physical shape, aggressive, thinking 24/7 the game on and on. Do you think maybe the American players are just getting fed up with it?
Well, I think there's a possibility that his message just might not be getting through. But, the more I think about the Fabian Johnson situation, the more I think that he did that to kind of either maintain the approval of the veteran players, the support of the veteran players. And, it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of them came up to Jurgen Klinsmann and said, hey, you're not going to let that slide, are you? Now, the public, rebuke, the public shaming of Fabian Johnson, I do think that was a step too far. I think Jurgen Klinsmann could have gotten his point across and without having to go public with it. So, I still think it's a little bit premature. I mean, my ESPN FC colleague Doug McIntyre, he was in the mix zone on Tuesday, and he said that the players, just reading their body language, he still thinks that Klinsmann still has some support, and I'm sure he does. I mean, there are some guys there who owe their international careers to Jurgen Klinsmann, and that's going to engender a lot of loyalty, I think. But and there's always a risk. I mean, if you're a veteran player and you go over the coach's head, and Sunil Gulati says, no, this is my guy, then that player's left in almost an impossible situation. So, I think at the moment, Klinsmann still has some support, but he's got to make better decisions. I mean, he can't be playing Ali Bedoya in a holding midfielder role against Brazil and then almost blame him, for the fact that he didn't play well. I mean, that kind of behavior, that kind of, public throwing under the bus, I think that does start to erode the trust of the players in Klinsmann. And, you see Klinsmann losing that trust. You see him losing it with fans. You see him losing it with the media a little bit. You see him losing it with some players. How much? That's the big question right now.
Jeff, love having you on. Love your analysis. Love the way you explain it to us inside out. Really enjoy having you on again. You're a class act. Thank you so much again for making time out of your busy schedule, and really always enjoy having you on, as I said, Jeff.
Anytime, Anthony.
Class act, Jeff Carlisle of ESPN. I consider him a friend of the show. What a wonderful guy he is, always making time out of his busy schedule to join us here on Red Card.